What's up, folks? Welcome back to the stream. It's Tuesday. Let's get friggin' tactical, everybody. I am doing a little different thing today because T5S2 Invitational season's here, so that's super exciting. We are taking the top 16 players from the T5S2 online competitive series. If you're not familiar with that, you can head on over to tts40k.com for more information, or you can just join us in the Discord. Actually, all the information is over there, so go friggin' check that out because it's good stuff. And basically, we play a ton of competitive 40k online, rank all of the events together. We have a live standings that you can see here. We actually have our Season 6 standings up. This is for Season 5, which is the last 6 months. Currently, the seasons are biannual. And we take the top 16 players from that ranking at the end of the season and make them fight each other. So that's super exciting. This is going to be our 5th invitational tournament. And I'm sure if you've tracked back on the channel long enough, you will have seen the coverage of the previous invitational tournaments. And it's been good stuff every season. So this time around, we're going to be doing a breakdown of the lists from this invitational. So instead of talking about, recent meta trends and games and stuff like that, we're just going to be talking about invitational stuff. The coverage for those games are going to be simulcast both on the YouTube channel, and you can already find some stream events for those. So if you go to the channel, that they are there. So that's great. We have... Let me look at my schedule real quick here, make sure I know what we have starting with. Actually, it's literally on this page. I can just scroll down and look at it. Oh, no. Where did it go? Come here, schedule. There it is. So we're starting with Necrons versus Craftworld Eldar. That's happening tomorrow morning. Then we have 2 games tomorrow evening scheduled. The players create the schedule, so that is totally up to them. That's going to be Thousand Suns versus Tyranids and Sororitas versus Chaos Space Marines. And those are going to be simulcast. Those are going to be... we're going to watch those at the same time because they're happening both Wednesday, tomorrow night, 9 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. But 11 a.m. is going to be the first game, so if you are... in a time zone that is you're not going to be around on a late Wednesday evening, then that's totally fine because we have a game tomorrow morning, and it should be good. So as you can see here, the format of the event is the top 16 players go into a bracketed, a seeded bracket, excuse me, and then we will fight down over 4 rounds to just get to end up with only a single winner. So we have 8 games for this first round. As soon as those players finish their games, they're open to schedule their second game if they know their next opponent. So we'll have that schedule being updated constantly as the games finish up. And then that goes to the semifinals and grand finals, which is going to be the weekend of the 30th and 31st of July. So chat, let's get freaking hyped for that because it's going to be awesome. And so today what we're going to be doing is talking about the lists a little bit. So I made myself a little breakdown of the lists. We have a pretty good swath of different factions in the Invitational this time around. 3 Codex Eldar factions, which I think is not too surprising given how powerful Craftworld Eldar was previously, but it is a little bit interesting that we do see some Craftworld Eldar popping up. So that's going to be MooMooCow playing Ulthway, Asuryani, and then we have 2 Harlequin players, King Kong Fury and Jonathan B, both playing those. I know Jonathan basically Harlequin diehard, so that's going to be some good Harlequin play from them. We also have 2 Space Marine sub-factions. They're coming back into the metagame a little bit here. Space Wolves and Blood Angels, piloted by Agent X and Niklas Lackner, respectively, as well as a ton of Sororitas and Heretic Astartes. We have some splashes of other stuff in there. 2 Tyranid players, Nabs or Indicus Magpie and CMob, both bringing those, as well as 4, I guess, Heretic Astartes sub-factions. We do have Devin Swann playing Thousand Suns, so that technically, I guess, is Heretic Astartes. They have the correct keyword, as well as Dutes and Dylan Usher, as well, and Disappointing Salad, all playing regular Heretic Astartes from that new Codex. We have splashes of some other stuff, 1 Necrons, 1 Custodes as well. But I think the story of the event and probably of the metagame in the not too distant future, maybe with a little bit more of a representation from Tyranids and Necrons and maybe a smattering of Space Marines, is going to be that Heretic Astartes versus Adepta Sororitas, because, I mean, the Heretic Astartes, it's a new faction. They have a lot of powerful tools. They have a ton of really strong melee, and Sororitas are already strong statistically, but also have these insane access to these insane secondary objectives that is going to make them super duper powerful. So I think I put those two on the thumbnail for a reason, and I think that's going to be what we're going to be watching a lot of over the course of this event, which I think is super exciting. So when looking through specific lists, chat, does anybody have any requests on what we talk about, on what we go through first? I think I guess we could rip our Band-Aid off and talk about Tyranids real quick here. We can go through the Tyranid lists because they're they're Tyranid lists. We've been talking about Tyranids for the last 2 months or so. So I don't know if we necessarily need to spend a ton of time on those. Now, if you want to get in here and check out these lists yourself, it's tts40k.com. You can go to the invitational link up here, or tts40k.com/invitational will get you there, and you can come hang out. So that'll be good. Money's in random player for shooting your melee sisters. Yeah, we'll see. So we'll just rip this Tyranid Band-Aid off real quick, because we can. I think at this point, I feel confident in talking about 9th edition Tyranids. So both these players have gone for Leviathan builds, so nothing too exciting happening here. CMOB bringing kind of a standard build. This is it's High Fleet Leviathan with the regular Neurostroke with the Tyranid Prime, or with the Resonance Barb, Tyranid Prime. Interestingly, with Alien Cunning, so he gets objectives secured and can hold down objectives by himself. One Winged Hive Tyrant with Reaper of Obliterax, which I think the stock of Reaper of Obliterax might have gone up with the prevalence of not only Phoenix Lords, but Phoenix Lords and Catan potentially, but also Abaddon in the metagame. The Reaper of Obliterax is actually looking pretty spicy right now. He's bringing Adaptive Biology on that guy to make him harder to kill with the 5+ damage ignore, which seems good. 2 units of Tyranid Warriors, 1 unit of Termagants. Interestingly, I do think that the spicy part about this list, and this list is, when we get down to it, especially for a High Fleet Leviathan list, it is pretty spicy because we don't see a big warrior brick. We don't have the big 9-man warrior squads that most of these High Fleet Leviathan lists are predicated on. Instead, we're bringing 2 Maleceptors, who I'm actually surprised to see on the table because they are wildly expensive now. 220 points apiece, but the amount of mortal wounds they put out is huge. And that's really important because one of the big the big boogeymen in the metagame, and especially for this event, is going to be that Heretic Astartes, which are particularly susceptible to mortal wounds. They have a lot of anti-attack defenses. They have things that will muck with your hit rolls, with your wound rolls, with your re-rolls, but they have very little against mortal wounds specifically, unless you're playing Word Bearers. So against 2 Maleceptors, you can chew through big Possessed bricks, big Terminator bricks very quickly with those guys. We also have 2 Harpies, which is another weakness, particularly of that faction, because the Cast Space Marine shooting, while it's fine, isn't like ridiculously strong. And unless they have a super fast flying threat like a Helldrake or potentially a Demon Prince, although they're not super fast, then they have very little way to actually deal with the aircraft. So the Harpies can fly around the table, drop bombs on them, shoot them with guns, and call it a day. I like the inclusion of this Tyrannocyte. It's probably to put the Pyrovores in, but one thing that you can do, I mean, it's actually really, it's a good tech piece, because you can put the Maleceptors in it if you want to be able to drop them aggressively. You can also put a Harpy into it, and that's really important if you're up against a faction like Tau. Unfortunately, no Tau showed up for this event, which is a little bit surprising, but if they have super duper strong ranged Alpha Strike, and you're not on a map that you feel confident able in your ability to hide two Harpies, you can actually put one in the Tyrannocyte and drop it turn 1. So if you lose the roll to go first, at least the Harpy gets to activate before it gets shot by railguns and dies. Yeah, so that one's there's a little bit of spice in there. Maleceptors, see, coming back a little bit, but I do think that it's an appropriate pick in the metagame right now. The other one, Nabs here, Odysseus Magpie, is playing something is a little bit spicier. It is also High Fleet Leviathan, so the same High Fleet, and we're bringing a lot of the same combos. We have the Resonance Barb Neurothrope, we have the Winged Hive Tyrant with Maw Claws of Thyrax on this Winged Hive Tyrant, which is a pick after my own heart. chat. I love the old Monoclaws of Thyrax. Importantly, no adrenal glands on this guy, so he's a little slower than normal, but that's not the end of the world. 1 unit of gargoyles, 2 big units of warriors, units of 5. So not quite the full bricks that we typically see in Leviathan, but pretty close. 1 unit of Tyrant Guard to keep that Hive Tyrant alive, some Zone Thropes and Venom Thropes. 2 Biovores, which I think is pretty interesting because they can block off a lot of, especially like landing zones for charges. With the Spore Mines being placed, and especially there's a lot of lists now in Chaos Space Marine lists that are bringing Land Raiders. You can actually pin in the Land Raiders pretty well with their engagement range. Just because those big vehicles only moving 10 inches, you can put, while they can move over the mine, you can put the mine in such a way that they can't end their movement within its engagement range. And it makes things a little bit awkward. And I guess one thing that I hadn't thought about before, too, is that the 2-inch engagement range rule, which is in play for at least the first stage of this event, the first 2 rounds, and then we'll have a cut to the top 4, and from there we'll reevaluate the 2-inch engagement range rule when it comes to obscuring terrain, and that will also apply to Spore Mines. So their engagement range will actually expand, and their ability to block your placement will actually expand once they get entered into obscuring terrain, which I hadn't thought about before. Now I'm just thinking about it. That's actually kind of hilarious. We have 2 Harpies in this list as well, and the spice comes from 3 Screamer Killers, which I know Indicius absolutely loves, so I think it's pretty appropriate. I thought you couldn't put Maleceptors in drop spores because their base is more than 3 inches. If your base is larger than 3 inches, chat, you can disembark within 1 inch of a transport. You're never prevented to, or I should say, you're no longer prevented from disembarking because of the size of your base, unless you're physically screened out by enemies. Yeah, chat. So yeah, Stranglethorn cannons on the Harpies, mostly because of the expense of the heavy venom cannons. The heavy venom cannon Harpies went up to 210 points, I think. So once you start putting those enhancements on them, the adaptive physiologies, they get super expensive. So this one keeps them significantly cheaper. And yeah, we can see here that C-Mob is bringing the heavy venom cannon Harpies, so he has to pay an extra 60 points for his Harpies, 215 and 230 respectively, because of the expense of those cannons. So the Stranglethorn cannons, I mean, it's a fine weapon. It's 2 damage. It's D3 plus 3 shots. It blasts. So especially against big enemy units, and we will see some factions. I don't know if there's any 11 plus size units, so the blast keyword matters, but there are some situations where the having that blast keyword is a pretty big deal. Hype to see Tyranids, and if there's anything outside of Leviathan or Kraken. Yeah, unfortunately, these are only on 2 Tyranid list, chat, so only Leviathan today, but they're pretty spicy. I do appreciate that our Tyranid players are bringing some spice. So I think that's pretty fun. All right, what did people request for the next games to look at? Hotshot 121 asked for Custodes. Yeah, we'll take a look at Custodes here. So we have CoGo playing Custodes. CoGo, very strong, kind of Imperium stan, I guess, has played a ton of different Imperium sub-factions, and especially Custodes more recently. He is playing an Emperor's Chosen list, and he told me... He told me as he submitted his list, he was like, the game plan is just to we're just gonna like basically force through secondary objectives. That's it. That's all we're doing. So with the more recent data slate change to Custodes, meaning that their characters and non-troops units no longer get objective secured, we're just gonna be trying to push as many of these objective secured infantry on the table as possible. So we have 26 Custodian Guards, 1 big unit with Guardian Spears, 2 big units with all Presidium Shields. Just trying to stay as defensive as possible while we can just hold on to center objectives effectively. 2 Vexillus Praetors, one with the Vexilla Magnifica, so the minus with the hit aura, or the dense cover aura, I should say. The other one with the Vexilla Defensor, so the light cover aura. So theoretically, the Presidium Shielded Custodian Guards, if you don't ignore cover, which is, I think, very rare in this pool, they are going to be a 0+ armor save because they have the +1 from the shield and then the +1 from light cover and -1 to be hit on top of the potential use of defensive stratagems that Custodes have. We have a little unit of Witch Seekers with Flamers and 2 characters, Trajan Flores and a Knight Centura, to fill out the battalion detachment. But that's basically it, chat. just a million custodian guards standing in the middle of the table. Looking at CoGo's first round matchup here. He is playing against Dylan Usher, who is playing Heretic Astartes. So I'm a little bit worried about these custodians, chat. Generally speaking, I've found in my experience so far against Chaos Space Marines is that the way to defeat them, and they certainly can be defeated, I think, unlike a lot of the other powerhouse factions that have been released so far, they aren't, this sort of unbeatable god machine. But the way to defeat them is from engaging them at a long distance. And that's not what 20 Presidium Shield Custodians are going to do. So the question is whether or not they can overpower Heretic Astartes in the fight phase. It's going to be a tough battle for them. But mass objective secured also helps. And if, we can just make those 0+ armor saves, man. I think the other thing is that there's a lot of points, especially in these 2 Vexillus Praetors, in anti-ranged defenses to keep the Custodian Guard alive, and those are not going to be super useful against Chaos Space Marines. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to be pretty interesting. Surprised no Necrons or Death Guard? There is a Necron, chat. Yeah, no Death Guard. I think Death Guard, I have to imagine, I think the players that would have taken Death Guard are probably moving to Heretic Astartes. From a super faction standpoint, you're not even out of the neighborhood, and on top of that, you have a very similar game plan. You have similar levels of resilience. A lot of times, you're even more resilient as Heretic Astartes, at least on specific units, because you can target your buffs. And the game plan is very similar. You just want to take these big Terminator bricks, these big medium-based infantry bricks, and ram them up into your opponent's face, take the center of the table, and then push them out on primary effectively. So the game plan is super similar between Death Guard and Heretic Astartes. I think Death Guard shooting is probably better because they have the Toll Contemptor combo, they have Plague Burst Crawlers, but if you're looking at playing against other Heretic Astartes, they're going to be very resilient to shooting, and they probably have similar or better defenses in melee. So the
this
trade-off
pepperoni did not get here by accident. Oh no! It was carefully placed here by hand by a pizza maker at Papa John's. And they didn't stop just because they hit the crust. They took all that pepperoni and hand-stuffed it inside.
Individual
that signature pepperoni recipe, giving every bite a little extra bite. A kick in every melty pull.
MaxGw. Actually, number one seed going into the event.
Stuffed crust pizza, only at Papa John's.
At the very top of the ranking, and elected to move to Necrons, which I think is pretty cool. And to be fair, it's not like a particularly... I guess it is a little bit of a spicy list, but we are playing Relentlessly Expansionist Eternal Conquerors, so the OBSEC sub-faction. We are bringing Silent King, I think, as you kind of have to these days. Although I don't believe that we have a combo to resurrect his friends, his rocks, the Meniers. No, we would need a Saraz in the list, but we don't have any Sarazes. But interestingly, the interesting thing about Necrons, I think, in my opinion, is that they have so much CP economy. Their command point economy is YouTube just put an audio commercial over me. I hope I don't have a. Let me take a look here, channel. I hope I don't have another tab open doing stuff. I think that should be okay. I apologize for any interruptions, chat. It might be because it might have played somewhere else on my machine, so that would be awkward, but I think that's okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I found I know what happened, chat. All right. Should be good now. Yeah, sorry, chat. That was another tab I had open in the back there. It was actually, I think that was a Twitch channel. Ah, terrible. How could I? All right. Anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. So, the interesting thing about Necrons is that their command point efficiency is so strong that they don't really care about the Nephilim command point changes. So they have what's the word? They can pick detachments that aren't necessarily patrol or battalion. So they actually have like sort of kind of a wide open selection of battlefield role slots. So in this case, we have the Supreme Command Detachment, who's actually, is it? I guess it will be refunding its command point cost there. Or yeah, it's not refunding any other detachment command point cost because we don't have any other detachments beside a Spearhead. So that's going to give us a lot of heavy support options. We have 3 Annihilation Barges, which I know are getting a lot of play more recently, just because of the fact that they are core keyworded, so they get benefits from like +1 to hit from My Will Be Done and rerolls from the Silent King. So they can become significantly more efficient, and for just 125 points, you know, plus being quantum shielded, they're kind of hard to kill. It's pretty good. We have 2 Doom Scythes. Probably for the similar reason. They are core keyworded also. So if you play sort of aggressively with your Silent King, you can push him up the table to get the rerolls on the Doom Scythes, which make the spikiness of the Doom Scythe guns significantly better. And then we have 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers, which I think most Necron lists are probably starting with these days, just because, again, they're just an efficient gunshot. For 50 points, you just get, you know, a super hardcore anti-tank weapon that your opponent really has to respect. 2 units of Tomb Blades that are just there to run and grab objectives and stuff like that, as well as a Catan Shard of the Deceiver, who can, now with his redeployment ability, I believe, redeploy almost anything in the faction, including, if I'm not mistaken, the Silent King himself, which is a pretty big deal. So that is good for an aggressive Silent King play. A unit of 5 Scorpic Destroyers. I don't believe that we have a Veil for them, so they're just going to be walking up the table. But again, if you're busy worried about, you know, if you're too busy dealing with 2 Doom Scythes as well as the Silent King himself, you can probably deliver those guys pretty well, especially into a center objective. And then we have, just the Catacomb Command Barge. Having the Command Barge plus the Silent King gives you really good options for Code of Combat, because you have 2 units that can pretty reliably kill at least small enemy units. And giving you more outs for that means that if the Silent King gets killed accidentally early, you can still potentially score that secondary, or vice versa. If the Catacomb Command Barge can trade for a unit to get you going on your Code of Combat score, then the Silent King can close it out usually by himself. So, yeah, pretty good stuff, chat. Yeah, this list is pretty cool. It is just the regular Expansionist to Conquerors list, but I think generally speaking, it's going to be a pretty interesting one. And then from there, we can talk about the other. That is the other one-off. So I guess we can start talking about a different faction. Oh yeah, Torin pointing out earlier in the chat that if CoGo's list had been Shadow Keepers, it would have been really good. Yeah, it's a little interesting that they're not, I guess. Although, I mean, you have the one-off Esteemed Amalgam to put 1 unit into Shadow Keepers for a round. so you can like rebuff turn 1, like an early charge. But yeah, the Shadow Keepers would have been really good for a list like this, because you already have, I guess to be fair, the Mortal Wound defense is strong, especially if people are teching into Mortal Wounds to fight Chaos Space Marines. So they have things 4+ against Mortal certainly helps. But being able to defend yourself against ranged attacks with the 2 Praetors, and then on top of that, give yourself the defense against melee attacks with the Shadow Keepers abilities. That'd be pretty strong. Not to be, though. Yeah, that's a good call out. I think I almost would have preferred to see that for sure. Any Space Marines lists? We can talk about Space Marines next. We do have 2 Space Marine lists. Pretty cool ones. We have Age of Dax playing Space Wolves and Niklas Lackner, playing Blood Angels. We can talk about Blood Angels first. Because I think it's probably going to be the slightly more recognizable list from ones that we've seen more recently. So it has a 5-mana Voidsman at Arms to hold a backline objective. Commander Dante, who I think a lot of Blood Angels lists are going to be playing, just because you're not obligated to take his Warlord trait, but even if he is selected as the Warlord, you still regenerate your CP, even if he doesn't have the Warlord trait. It looks like I think we have just elected to spend the CP anyway, because we might as well in this situation, because we have so many starting CP to give him his 6-inch intervention. But that means he can sort of more aggressively protect the Sanguinary Guard units, which is good. We have a Sanguinary Priest with Armor Indomitus and Rites of War, so we do give the Sanguinary Guard their objective secured. Some regular Primaris infantry to hold the troop slot. 1 unit of Death Company Marines, so that it's just the singleton, which I think is really important because it forces your opponent to respect the threat of Forlorn Fury. So for 180 points, you get a unit that's pretty competent in melee, but if your opponent doesn't deploy well, or I guess we have 6 guys in this unit right now, it looks like. If your opponent doesn't respect them in deployment and loses the roll to go first, the Forlorn Fury hit can actually burn you for a ton of damage on the first turn. So even if you're not you're not planning to use the Death Company like that, and I know there are some lists that have been bandied around that are like focusing more heavily on Death Company because of the Fury of the Lost secondary. Having 1 unit I feel like is almost required in Blood Angels lists, just to be able to to make them deploy back, to make them screen against turn 1 melee, and that's going to make them less efficient when they're moving out of that starting position. So I think White Scars will see any play since the other 2 big Space Marine armies are looking strong. I think they will, chat. We were actually just talking about this on stream yesterday over on the Twitch channel, and the fact that not only are Space Marine melee is pretty good right now. I'm not gonna say it's good. Space Marine melee is the same as it's ever been, which is fine. Lightning Claws are pretty solid, I guess. Vanguard Veterans are pretty okay, but the thing that has changed is that Assault Marines are insanely efficient now, because almost all of their unit upgrades are free. So you can have in White Scars, especially once you get to turn 3 and your Assault Doctrine turns on, you have these little 90-point missiles of Assault Marine Sergeants with 2 Lightning Claws that just come in with 5 attacks and at 2 damage with full rerolls and just burn people alive. And I think that that little bit of efficiency is pretty good. It depends on how the metagame shakes out, because White Scars are pretty heavily impacted by damage reduction. So if damage reduction is really big in the metagame, you may not see them quite as much, but that depends entirely on how the meta shakes out. But I do think that White Scars are I wouldn't say the top of Space Marines, but certainly very playable. And I like White Scars, so I'm a little bit excited to see them on the table. But talking about this list, speaking of another list that's predicated on 2 damage weapons, we have 3 units of Sanguinary Guard, 7 Sanguinary Guard apiece, which I think has sort of become the standard unit size for Sanguinary Guard, which is a little interesting. I think that 7 is just a good number that reliably kills almost anything you need to, so why take more? We do have a Land Speeder Storm, which can, because of the Voidsman at Arms special ability, embark them, and then use them as they can use it as an assault transport carrier. So despite the fact that we don't have scouts in the list, and because of the Nephilim rules, if you don't bring an occupant for that dedicated transport, it's actually destroyed at deployment. But we do have, so despite the fact that we don't have scouts in the list, which are normally the only units that can embark in the Lance-Spitter Storm, the Voidsmen are going to be able to do it by themselves. So all good there, which is pretty exciting. And, you know, plus having that unit that can potentially, this is already an aggressive list. It has a ton of forward deployment. Well, it has a little bit of forward deployment. It has a little bit of aggression between the Death Company and the Incursors, and has a ton of these 5-man infantry squads. With the Voidsmen at Arms and the Lance-Spitter Storm, you have really good secondary objective options too. Like in worst case scenario, you can take a retrieve Nephilim data. You just have it do it with your backline units in the early game, and then you have a 5-man Voidsman squad that can push like 25 inches to score one of the forward quarters in the mid to late game. And then if you can get one of your jump pack infantry squads over there to do the last one, then you give yourself a nice little 12-point secondary, which is pretty good. Love the Tactical Tuesday graphic. Hey, thanks. Yeah, we get graphics for a lot of the different channel shows. So the TacticalTortoisetv got its own little logo. You can check that out on the channel, and we use that on Twitch now too. And then Tactical Tuesday got a new little logo, and I'm working on getting some animations done for those too, so that we can have some nicer pre-streams also. I'm trying to, as hard as I can, to increase the production value of the channel. I just got this new microphone. I forget if I recorded on this last week. I don't think I did, chat. I think I got it too late. But big shout out to Taco Panda, one of the Discord members who contacted me after I was having trouble with my microphone last week and gave me a ton of advice. And hopefully it sounds good. I'm pretty excited about it. But going back to this list, the other spicy thing about it is that we have these two 10-man Vanguard veteran squads. So they are both combat squattable. So if we need to, we can split our army into 8 distinct combat units between the 3 Sanguinary Guard units, the 1 Death Company unit, and then 4 Vanguard veteran combat squads. And all of those can deal pretty appreciable damage by themselves. Which is good. That's pretty strong. We also have mostly lightning claws and chain swords on those guys. People have been moving away from the storm shields after the Armor of Contempt's change, which does make the squad significantly cheaper, as well as 1 thunder hammer on the veteran sergeant. But overall, I think pretty standard Blood Angels stuff. It's interesting to see that this list, as opposed to a lot of Blood Angels lists, moves a little bit away from the character combos that you'll typically see, where you'll have combos like Deathly Visage plus Rites of War to automatically take objectives from people, because the Deathly Visage removes your objective secured, and Rites of War removes enemy objective secured, and Rites of War grants you your own objective secured. So regardless of whether or not they're OBSEC, you'll take the objective from them. We also have Armor Indomitus plus Angel Sacrifice is potentially we can use, and Dante with his Heroic Bearing can potentially use that wombo combo as well. But we're not leaning too heavily into it, which I think is good, because the characters end up being pretty costly on command points, and so having that lower starting value, especially with sometimes how reliant Blood Angels could be on stratagems, makes a ton of sense to me. So I like it. Crushin would not like to go second against this. Yeah, that's I mean, it's not quite as hard as you can go. I mean, going second against this means that they can drop all of their Sanguinary Guard on turn 2, but we don't have any charge bonuses besides the +1 to charge normally. So, and we also aren't even bringing the +1 movement banner, which is actually a little interesting. I didn't really notice that before. So I don't even know if I would call it an Alpha Strike list. I think it just runs at you for the most part and hopes for the best, which is probably pretty appropriate. But obviously having those Death Companies gives you the strong Alpha Strike if you ever need it. Better at any sisters? Oh yeah. Yeah, we have 3 sisters players in the Invitational. We're talking about Space Marines right now though, so let's go to the super spicy Space Marine list. This is Ancient X playing Space Wolves. You know, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty interesting that we have Space Wolves versus Harlequins as the one of the round one matchups this time around. Because if you've been following the T5S2 circuit since its inception, Harlequins versus Space Wolves is sort of the classic matchup of the Invitational. We had the first Invitational ever was won by Space Wolves in a Space Wolves versus Harlequins match, and we've seen it many times on the lead up. Space Wolves are kind of they're almost always the favorite to win for some reason, because we've had so many strong Space Wolves players in chat. We had Jaime Paris won, that was the first season, and we saw Animander take down the second season playing those Space Wolves, and yeah, congratulations to them. We'll have to see if Agent X can get in here as Space Wolves again. I hope so. So let's get into the Space Wolves. Any Grey Knights? No Grey Knights this time around, chat. Unfortunately. Our normal resident Grey Knight player, our invitational Grey Knights player, I guess, Devin, has moved to Thousand Suns. So no Grey Knights today. And we do have, I know in the server there's a lot of strong Grey Knights players. We do have Steve Preen plays occasionally, Headstrong plays, Matthew Green, but they I think we're focusing on in-person events this season, which a lot of people did, because in-person events are growing and growing as the seasons move along, which is totally understandable. So I don't think they played so much with on the online circuit this season. So moving to Agent X's list. This is actually a Red Scorpions list, but it's using Space Wolf successors. So basically, we're going to use a pretty interesting combination of successor traits. Normally, we take Born Heroes Whirlwind of Rage as a Space Wolf successor. Tanking yourself Red Scorpions doesn't really change that wombo combo, but it gives you a lot of access to other characters from the Imperial Armor Compendium. The Born Heroes Whirlwind of Rage gives you kind of it apes the classic Space Wolf sub-faction abilities, where normally your chapter tactic is +1 to hit on the charge. You get exploding sixes from your super doctrine once you hit assault doctrine, but Whirlwind of Rage gives you access to that exploding sixes for the entire game and combos with the super doctrine. So then you test all your sixes on Battle Round 3+. We're not taking Born Heroes this time. We're actually taking Stalwart, so the army can only be wounded on 3+. Nothing wins it on 2s, which is pretty interesting. It might be a little bit of a concession to like Tyranids and I guess like Sororitas, because there's a lot of heavy Melta guns or heavy Melta lists wound a lot of the Space Marines on 2s, and especially if we are focusing on non-Primaris Space Marines, we don't have access to transhuman physiology, which means the Stalwart gives you a little bit of additional benefit there. But a lot of times you see these lists focusing more on the offense than the defense, and just assuming that you're going to die in the swing back. So it is a little interesting to see a Stalwart pick, which is pretty cool. So we're taking Casson Sabius in the HQ slot, and I'm just going to pull up his data sheet real quick here, because I know generically what he does, but it'll be good to talk about him. I believe that he gives a nice +1 attack bonus, which is pretty good if you're trying to charge people with veteran squads. So here's our best bud Casson Sabius here from Wikipedia. So he has a classic 6-inch reroll, or a reroll hits buff, because he's a chapter master, and then Purity of Aspect, Action, and Intent is a command phase selected +1 attack. So he can sort of wombo combo up one big unit, give them full rerolls and +1 attack, which, to be fair, talking about the Born Heroes combo, you don't necessarily need Born Heroes if the game plan is going to be to pick one unit, give it full rerolls, and then murder someone with it. +1 to hit doesn't combo particularly well with full rerolls, so you don't necessarily need both of them. We have a Phobos Librarian, bringing Living Lightning and Murderous Hurricane. So we do have access to a Fight Last there, plus a Chaplain with Armor of Rust. So the classic Space Wolf fight phase manipulation, where we have access to 2 Fight Last abilities in addition to all of these offensive buffs, which is pretty sweet. If we can adaptive strategy one of these units, like a Wolf Guard unit, into and the Wolfen always count as being in Assault Doctrine, then we can give them +1 attack, Teslaing 6s with full rerolls to hit. And so the damage output of these units is like sort of through the roof. So that being able to combo that with fight lasts means that you could actually have a chance to commit into heavy offensive factions like Heretic Astartes, and you have a pretty good chance of being able to actually come out on top. We have Assault Intercessors and 2 Infiltrators in the troops slot. Nothing too exciting there, although Infiltrators over in Curses is pretty interesting. Pay the extra points, but you get that 12-inch anti-deep strike bubble. Plus, I think the Marksman Gold Bolt Carbine is kind of situationally better than the Oculus Bolt Carbine, so a little bit of a buff. I don't know if that's worth any points, but it's kind of nice. 3 units of Wolfen with a mix of Thunderhammer, Storm Shields, and Claws. I think the Wolfen have kind of been the standout from Space Wolves more recently, mostly just because of the fact that they just trade with enemy units 1 for 1. They're so damaging in melee, and the downside for them is oftentimes that they will get shot to death. But if you play them in a more defensive role, you can threaten, especially because they have a 40mm base, so you just put the unit leader or one of the random mooks on the center of an objective. You can threaten their heroic intervention because of the stratagem onto anywhere on that objective. Then you... even if your opponent has charged and swings first, if they kill the wolf and the wolfen fight back. So it's difficult or impossible to actually take an objective or contest an objective that wolfen are standing on, which makes them a really good primary objective threat. Which I think, plus the fact that they hit like an absolute truck. So if you're against an army, like a heavy melee skewed army, like a Tyranids, like a Heretic Astartes, they will just fight you and blow up a bunch of Tyranid warriors or possessed or whatever you want. And then I think the interesting pick here is Sky Claws. So we've kind of moved away from Wolfguard jump packs to Sky Claws because, like the Assault Marines, the Sky Claws got a lot of free upgrades in their on their data sheet. So we actually have 3 Meltaguns, excuse me, 4 Meltaguns in each of these Skyclaw units. So it's a total of 6 models per unit, plus with the pack leader plus the Wolfguard pack leader. The Wolfguard pack leader is bringing a combi Melta, and the pack leader himself is bringing a Meltagun, and we have 2 special weapon Meltaguns. Now, the interesting thing about the Skyclaws in this situation is because they're not actual Space Wolves, they don't get the Berserk Charge ability doesn't unlock, which means they are just regular Assault Marines effectively, with a little bit of a downside. I believe that their leadership's worse. But with the pack leader and the access to the Red Scorpions buffs, that actually kind of circumvents that downside. So this is the damage output of these units is actually relatively wild. We have 2 Power Fists in each unit, and I believe they're going to be 4 and 5 attacks. Is that correct? Am I crazy there? Oh, we can just look at our Skyclaw pack data sheets here. Yeah, so the base pack leader goes to 2 attacks, 3 on the charge, 4 with Sabius's buff. So we have 8 attacks from 2 Power Fists, plus we have 4 guys with chain swords. So each of those guys is getting 1 attack, 2 on the charge, 3 with Sabius's buff, 4 with the chain sword. So 16 chain sword attacks. And all of those, assuming that all of your buffs are active, all of those Tesla, and you potentially are going into a brace of enemies that fight last. And remember, chat, that's after you shoot them with 4 Meltaguns. So for 148 points, these guys are little tiny nuclear missiles. We don't have, I believe, a Saga of the Hunter here. The Chaplain's been upgraded to a Master of Sanctity, and is taking Rites of War. Yeah, so no Hunter. So we can't advance and charge with these units. So the what do you call it? Threat range is it's fine. They can fight over center objectives just fine. But if your Rites of War, so you're going into an OBSEC aura. So you can take those center objectives really easily. Plus the Skyclaws being, a fast jump pack unit are good in secondary objectives. And then on top of that, we have a Long Fang drop pod combo. So only 4 multi-meltas in this one, but we do have an Armorium Cherub. And that's going to pop down potentially on turn 1. But unlike the other drop pod sub-faction that we see pretty often is Iron Hands, unlike Iron Hands where they're like obligated to drop on turn 1, because that's when their Super Doctrine is active, and you cannot methodical destruction them while they're in the drop pod to turn them back into Devastator Doctrine. The Long Fangs aren't tied to Devastator Doctrine at all. And that's because Iron Hands ignore the move and shoot penalty for their meltas, or for their heavy weapons, when they are in Devastator Doctrine and get reroll ones to hit. So they're, in that sub-faction, their Devastators do appreciably more damage, but you have to drop them turn 1. And if you can screen them out, or you keep your own important targets off the table, those the Iron Hands drop pods get dramatically worse as the game goes on. The difference is that the Long Fang drop pod isn't tied to that, because their way to ignore move and shoot penalty is with Keen Senses, which is just a stratagem in the shooting phase. So they can hop down anytime. And a lot of times you'll see either Long Fang drop pods or like Long Fangs in Strategic Reserve coming off table edges, or not Strategic Reserve, but the outflank that Space Wolves have, where they can use the same combo to push off the sides. Good stuff. So yeah, I'm excited for this list actually. I'm sort of rooting for Agent X. He is up against Harlequins on the first game, which makes it a little bit sad that he has the Meltaguns in his team. Although I guess the Meltaguns will be fine if he can potentially get enough of them onto a transport to reliably cut down the transport, and then he can charge onto the disembarking Harlequins. And that the Skyclaw unit probably kills a Harlequin squad on the charge. We'll have to see. But I think they would much rather be going into something, much scarier, much bigger, and more heavily armored. We also have a Wolfguard Terminator squad we didn't even talk about, with Mordekai's Teeth Bolts on the Wolfguard Terminator, or on the Terminator Pack Leader, to get reroll once to wound. Give you a little bit of a lieutenant buff, effectively, from shooting at somebody. But yeah, from there, we did just mention Harlequins, so we can talk about Harlequins real quick. We have 2 Harlequins lists from King Kong Fury and Jonathan. And they mostly look the same, which is to be expected from Harlequins, but they're slightly different. Jonathan playing a Dark Sadith, so he's going to get his +1 AP on the charge. He also has the situational fight last, now been significantly debuffed from the previous version where they just fought last, or fight on death, where they just fought when they died. Now, I think they just ping for mortals occasionally when they die, significantly worse. But when you're looking at going into Armor of Contempt, and especially Heretic Astartes enemies, getting that +1 AP is actually a really big deal. So both of these players taking a Shadow Seer, although we do have Laughing God's Eye in Jonathan's list, so the 5+ against mortal wounds. And then both with the Troop Master, Jonathan's taking Foot in the Future, so the charge a million inches Warlord trait, as well as Shegarax Rose. King Kong Fury over here taking... Oh, also Foot in the Future, just kidding. So I think the only difference is that we have a Queen of Shards on the on Jonathan's side there. And then a bunch of troops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think in both lists with 6 Star Weavers to ferry them around. So 1 million Harlequin player troops. And then 5 Void Weavers. Although the loadout of the Void Weavers is a little bit different from list to list. Jonathan's list is playing the Void Weavers in 2 of 2 and 1 of 1. Whereas King Kong Fury is playing 2 of 1 and 1 of 3. So... not huge differences there, but the singleton Void Weavers are a little bit more efficient for getting secondaries. You can get engaged in all fronts and things like that with the singleton Void Weavers really easily. But generally, you already have the Star Weavers, so it's sort of doesn't really make that much of a difference. But the Void Weavers give you a good sync for if you need to use your luck dice offensively. Not to mention the fact that they just have a really good gun. So In addition to the massive amount of shuriken cannon shots that you can put out with the Star Weavers, you also have the prismatic cannon shots from the Void Weavers. And so if your opponent isn't committing into you, you can just peck them away. And especially with the amount of objective control and your super easy scoring secondary objectives, there's no real incentive to like play too aggressively from a Harlequins player's perspective, which is a little bit interesting because they feel like they should play aggressively, but they actually play like sort of a mid-table gun line where they just put all of these pretty resilient transports in the center of the table and they shoot you and then they say, what are you going to do about it? And if your answer is charge you, then everyone bails out and they have a big fight. But if the answer is nothing, I'm sorry, then they just win on secondaries. And so it's going to be interesting to see, you know, whether or not the metagame can answer the question of Harlequins, because I think they have a wide toolbox, but they're almost more of a question faction than they are an answer faction in the most recent variety. Now, so interesting stuff. Now, we do have one list from not Harlequins. MooMooCow is playing Asuryani. We've had MooMooCow in Invitational a couple different times, and he's played... I think he generally favors Eldari factions, but I know he cut his teeth originally in T5S2 on Necrons and played some really off-the-wall Necron lists when the faction was still relatively new, focusing on things like, I think he played like all Canoptech units one time, and he played all vehicles a couple of different times, and the combinations of different sub-faction abilities he used are really interesting. But he's back to his old love here of Eldari, and now playing Ulthwé. So I think the way that the Asuryani faction's moving is significantly more heavily towards Ulthwé moving on into the future. And I think there's a little bit of a push towards like Biltan and a little bit towards Ynnari, but away from Hail of Doom now that Hail of Doom has been significantly debuffed. And from there on, playing what is, for the most part, I don't want to say like a too straightforward Eldari list, because he does have a triple Fire Prism combo in here, which I think is pretty awesome. Basically, I can't... it's with the one use only of Fire and Fade now in the most recent data slate change to Asuryani. I don't know how much the game plan is going to be to rely on the Fire Prism combo, which is generally that you can hide all three Fire Prisms, expose one of them, use Linked Fire to fire the other two Fire Prisms through the cannon of the first one, then use Fire and Fade to keep that Fire Prism out of line of sight as well. So you can effectively fire all of them from outside line of sight. But with the new Nephilim rules, restricting the amount of command points you have access to, although we do have Fateful Divergence on the Farseer here, so we do have really good CP regen, because we're going to be able to pull back CP from there. And if we ever go for a mental interrogation, there's probably also really good CP generation from that as well, especially if you can burn Strains of Fate dice to get big, huge psychic interrogation rolls. You can automatically regenerate CP from that, so you don't even need to cast Fateful Divergence. It just saves you a cast effectively. So we do have a reasonable amount of CP, and our starting CP for the list is 2. So you're at 3-4 on your first turn, and I believe that full combo does cost 4, which means it's a little tough to get off reliably more than once. So if that's the game plan, we're not really focusing on Dire Avengers or these other squishy units or Wind Riders that are trying to make use of Fire and Fade. If you only need the Fire Prisms to fire out of line of sight one turn for it to make a difference, then that's probably okay. Yeah, so the Linked Fire is 2 and the Fire and Fade is 2. Yeah, so it's a 4 CP combo to make that happen. But if you just burn your CP doing that, then you keep the Fire Prism safe for a turn, and the next turn they can expose themselves and kill everything that can kill them. You're in a pretty good spot. And then from there, you can just use your Rangers and your Aspect Warriors to trade for objectives over and over again, and hope that you can out-attrition your opponent. So the full list, we are bringing 2 Phoenix Swords. We have Beheroth, who I think is still strong enough that you can still take. 160 points for that guy is still really, really good. We have 2 Farseers, and we do have a little bit of an interesting combo here. One of them is bringing the Ghost Helm of Al-Shazir, which gives you undeniable casts on a 9+, I believe. for that Skyrunner, and that's one of the and it's a natural 9+ as well, so I don't believe it takes in the Ulthway +1 to cast, but that's one of the real benefits of taking Ulthway is you get access to that relic, and one of the reasons for that is it gives you a really strong chance to get an undeniable psychic action off, which means the Farseer Skyrunner can push up forward, get within 6 inches of the center of the table, try to get off an undeniable Warp Ritual or a Psychic Interrogation, especially if you have a Strands of Fate for your Psychic test. You can throw that down, and you only need a 3+ on the other dice to confirm the undeniable power. There's nothing your opponent can do about it. You automatically score. Then we have a singleton. I love this little guy right here. A singleton Warlock Skyrunner down here with Quicken. And that guy could just sit in the back of the table and pass a Quicken to the dude in the middle, the Farseer Skyrunner, and Ghost Helm Vanishes your guy. Runs right away. Goodbye. We have a support Farseer with Focus Will, so we can make that those casts even better. We can potentially Focus Will either the Quicken guy or the Ghost Helm guy, plus Fateful Divergence to regenerate CP. Both of those pretty good. And then from there we have, I do appreciate that we have this huge Warlock Skyrunner unit, which is pretty cool, with Protect Jinx, Embolden Horrify. Pretty interesting. Although, and I don't believe there's a single Will of Asuryani in this list, now that I'm looking at it. Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. I guess, so there's no way to get objective secured onto the Aspect Warriors as far as I can see, which is a little interesting. We do have objective secured on the Phoenix Lords themselves, so Karandras is the other Phoenix Lord being taken, as well as Behareth have it, and the Rangers all have it because they're troops. So we do have 2 units of regular Rangers, just unupgraded, and then 1 unit with Wire Weave Nets. The Wire Weave Nets you typically see deployed out first because they make aggressive charges into them very difficult. And then you can use the other ones to either come in out of the webway, perform actions, or you just use them to trade for center objectives. Then we have a bunch of bikes. So there's 1 unit of Swooping Hawks we can bounce around with. Again, it's super good for secondary objectives. And if they go with Behareth, they will get objective secured within 6 inches of him. 1 unit of Shining Spears. Again, we can use as a trading unit. And then 1 unit of Shroud Runners. And the Shroud Runners also give you access to another defensive Wire Weave stratagem. So unlike the Wire Weave Net, it is a 12-inch range, and it basically tangle-foots at the start of the movement or charge phase and reduces your movement by D3. So in this list where we're trying to protect this boat, this gun line of 3 Fire Prisms, having those Shroud Runners makes a ton of sense because unlike Tanglefoot Grenades, if I remember correctly, that stratagem is also irrespective of line of sight, meaning that you can just keep those guys pretty far back behind a ruin or something like that. And if your opponent ever breaks through your front line, you can mess up their charges when it comes in, when it comes to trying to engage those Fire Prisms in the back. Let me see if I can find that stratagem chat. Nope, I can't. That's okay. So yeah, I think overall pretty interesting list. 3 Fire Prisms is not necessarily what I would expect, but I guess you do have the floating reroll from Ulthway, the Ulthway sub-faction benefit, so that certainly helps. Plus, relying on armor with a 6+ invulnerable save is pretty good for Eldari because it gives you really good sinks for your 6s on Strains of Fate dice. So if you have 6s on automatic 6s on saving throws, and the Fire Prism of a 6+ invuln save, even if low volume, high damage enemy anti-tank is coming into you, like those big D6+2 las cannons, or D3+3 weapons, or melta-guns, you can auto pass those saves to your heart's content, which makes the Fire Prisms much more difficult to kill than you would normally expect. So super excited to see that game. That is going to be against Necrons in the first round. So maybe we see some Fire Prisms blowing up Silent King. Who knows? They can shoot through invulnerable saves with that linked fire, so that certainly helps them quite a bit. But that moves us on, I think, to our top 2 factions, which are going to be Adeptus Sororitas and Heretic Astartes. Which should we start with, chat? Do we want to do Sororitas, or do we want to talk about Chaos Space Marines? I guess we could talk about Thousand Suns first, because there's only one Thousand Suns list, which is Devin. I'm going to take a drink real quick here. This is, I believe, going to be a relatively standard build out of Thousand Suns. There's not too much to talk about here that we haven't talked about before. It's a Cult of Duplicity list, so we have access to redeploy out of Sorceress Facade. Excuse me. We have a Sorcerer Ahriman, an Exalted Sorcerer to give rerolls to our Scarab Occult Terminator bricks, as well as an Infernal Master with an Umbralific Crystal, so another access to redeploy. 2 units of Rubric Marines, 1 big unit of Zangors, which I like. That's kind of cute. Usually you can Umbralific Crystal those guys. You just push them into a middle objective and say go. Dump the buffs on them. And we have a couple sort of outlets for that. We have 2 units of Chaos Spawn that we can be using to double move or to put defensive buffs on and make them super difficult to kill as they take the mid-board. And that's before we have to even move out the Scarab Occult Terminator bricks. The Zangors also do the same thing. For 140 points, you have 20 wounds. That can be really difficult to kill. We do have a 11+ unit chat. We found it. There you go. And then from there, just 2 Scarab Occult Terminator bricks with 1 billion damage. We do have the Zangor Shaman in here that I know Devin likes to use as his Psychic Interrogate bot, so that he has potentially undeniable interrogations. Although he also has Perplex on this guy, so maybe you're looking to muck with some ranged attacks. But he can play much more aggressively with the Zangor Shaman, knowing that if he loses it, he's not losing an actual sorcerer. He's losing a crappy Zangor that he's not too worried about. But then the 2 Scarab Occult Terminator bricks is where all the damage comes from. 2 Hellfire Missile Racks, 2 Soul Reaper Cannons on those guys. And especially since right now, with sort of damage reduction effects, and especially Tyranids and armies like that are really shredded by Strength 6-ish, high AP or sort of mid AP weapons, those Soul Reaper Cannons are and Infernal Combi Bolters are absolutely brutal. It'll be interesting to see whether or not they have the punch to get through Chaos Space Marines, but I have a sneaking suspicion that the Psychic phase is going to be pretty brutal for Chaos Space Marines out of Thousand Suns. I think that the general consensus is that Chaos Space Marines have a really tough time with Thousand Suns just because of the mortal wounds that they can deal. All right. Looks like we want to talk about Chaos Space Marines now. Let's do it. Are ads still playing, chat? That shouldn't be happening. I wonder if YouTube is trying to insert ads. That's weird. Well, I apologize, chat. Yeah, I don't know why that would be happening. Oh. All right. Chaos Space Marines? Oh, there weren't any ads? Okay. Well, I don't know what chat's on about then. Okay. Well, chat was throwing me off. We can talk about Chaos Space Marines. So we have there's sort of two Chaos Space Marine builds out of the 3 that we're taking, and I know Dutes is in chat right now. What's up, dude? So we can talk about Dutes' list first. And Dutes and Disappointing Salad have both taken very similar lists out of Creations of Bile. And I think I think Dutes probably had a little bit of a hand in that, because I know that you two played before list submission, and I think Salad was won over to the cult of Creations of Bile. So we'll talk about Dutes' list first, which I think is probably going to be the originator of the build. So for those who don't know, the Busted Creations of Bile is it's +1 strength and movement, and you fight on death automatically all the time, which is super strong. They also have access to an advance and charge stratagem, which is pretty good. So they have a little bit, a slightly increased threat range from the other Chaos sub-factions. On top of that, the ability to advance and charge means, or the ability to fight in death, excuse me, means that they have just sort of unparalleled control over the fight phase. And I think that this is probably, this might be like a little bit of a reach, but I think that this sub-faction might just be the best melee army in 40k right now. We'll have to see how things shake out. I mean, Tyranids are still super strong, and I'm sure that there are other armies that can sort of contend with them, but none of, Space Wolves are pretty okay, but the difference is that the ability to fight on death means that even if your own melee is strong, the Chaos Space Marines basically just get to use that against you, because anytime you get to Alpha Strike against the Chaos Space Marines, I guess like Blood Angels maybe also in the mix, but like a Blood Angels army fighting into this army, anytime you hit a unit with your Sanguinary Guard and kill it, you're just also going to lose the Sanguinary Guard squad back. And the Chaos Space Marine profiles are relatively efficient for the output that you get from them, which means that you just end up at best at an even trade, and at worst you end up trading down. And especially because you can do that with the characters as well. So if you're committing into the big bricks in a Chaos Space Marine army, you're just trading your combat units for bricks, and the Chaos Space Marine characters are still going to be alive. But if you trade into the characters, they will still be able to kill you. So it's pretty tough. And on top of that, having a slightly increased threat range is a really big deal for Creations of Bile, because not a lot of the other Chaos sub-factions have huge threat ranges, and that's the big downside of the faction, I think. They're very resilient, especially against regular attacks, and they're extremely powerful in melee. But the fact that a lot of their army is predicated on these like move 6, move 7 kind of idiots, they can get stuck on the rocks a little bit. And the ability to advance and charge certainly helps that quite a bit. Is the 55 points left over for a Slaanesh Herald? That's up to Dutes, but probably yes. It's kind of whatever you need, but usually it's going to be, I think, a demon character for sure. So we have a Winged Demon Prince, which I appreciate. I think that we do. So we've actually not taken Abaddon in this list. And instead focused on entirely Creations of Bile, which is a little bit interesting. We have a Lord Discord on Hellstalker, and I know somebody in the chat was calling out Flames of Spite on that guy, which is entirely correct. That dude's super duper strong. We have a Master of Possession as well, and for those who don't know how the Master of Possession works, it's actually really he's a pretty cool caster. He has a bunch of really powerful psychic powers, including Cursed Earth, which improves the invulnerable save of his demon friends nearby, but also Pact of Flesh, which can regenerate people, which is important because the Master of Possession, when he goes to cast a spell, can deal D3 mortal wounds to a nearby friendly in order for a bonus on his cast. And that stacks with a second bonus from a Venom Crawler. So for 105 points, you get, I believe you end up with +3 to cast. I think the mortal wounds get you +2. And then the Venom Crawler is an additional +1. So he's a super duper reliable caster, with the downside that he deals damage to your own army. But he can heal that back with Pact of Flesh, and in some situations, because the Pact of Flesh can heal and regenerate models, he can. You can even get a little bit of a positional advantage from that, which is pretty sweet. So we have two cultist mobs, just as backline objective holders. 1 unit of legionnaires, again, just to hold an objective. They're a pretty okay profile. I mean, tactical marines are just fine, I guess, but at least they have an extra attack and a chainsword, so they're good at fighting. 3 units of chosen, which I know are basically just going to be little silver bullets that, with the ability to advance and charge, they and their own sort of power weapon equivalent, which gets them to strength 6, because the weapon is +1 strength and the Creations of Bile bonus is +1 strength, which is a pretty important cutoff. These guys are really good at plus Mark of Slaanesh and a Chaos Icon, comboing to give you +1 to hit as well. They wound a lot of sort of mid-strength targets on 3s or 2s. So the important cutoffs there for the +1 strength on the Chosen is T5, which is a lot of Tyranids, and especially Harlequins with all of their light vehicles, and T3, which is again Harlequins, all their light vehicles, and Adeptus Sororitas, which are all very important. And I guess also enemy Heretic Astartes, where they're possessed, are T5. So getting to that strength 6 cutoff with a unit like Chosen is a really big deal. And that's one of the huge benefits of Creations of Biles, that those accursed weapons, which is a power sword that gives you +1 attack, is super strong in the hands of somebody who's strength 6, or who's base strength 5, I should say. And then moving on, we do have a huge brick of Possessed, although I don't believe we have a Dark Apostle in this list. We don't. So we're just going to be trying to buff the Possessed with the psychic powers, but we do have the Black Ruin of Damnation on them to give them -1 to be wounded. We have a little unit of Possessed, I guess, to fall around, mop things up. 2 individual Chaos Spawn, which is just an efficient pick. That's sort of the Cyberwolf effect, where 25 points, it doesn't matter what your profile is, as long as you're an individual unit. You can just stick that dude on objective, and he's got a couple of attacks, and that's nice. The Venom Crawler as well, like I mentioned before, to give the +1 to cast. Plus, its profile is pretty strong. It has a good gun, which is good because we can also combat that with the Chaos Land Raider, which has very good guns. So the shooting from this list isn't particularly, impressive. It's good, but it's at least enough to keep your opponent's head down while you can push forward with the big possessed units. And then the Land Raider as well can also be holding on to the Chosen or Legionaries in order to project them a little bit farther if you need to. Are Legionaries still bad? It would be sad to see them play second fiddle. I wouldn't say bad, but they're just more expensive, which I think is the downside. But you do need more Chaos Space Marines in a detachment than Cultists, so you can't entirely spam Cultists. I think the Legionnaires are fine. They have a ton of attacks. They have exploding 6s because of the most of the time because of the Chaos Space Marine Doctrine ability, and they have Chainsword, so I guess they're okay. T5 seems to have become a lot more common. Yeah, I think so. T5 is kind of the new T4, I think. Like you're pushing for your base infantry to be T5 so that they're mostly resilient from those small arms. I think that's probably like Harlequins kind of started it with their transport spam being almost entirely T5 across the board, but Tyranids have certainly kind of expanded on that with basically their entire army being T5. So from there, we can talk about Salad's List, which is kind of a similar idea. This one is, we do have a lot of Legionnaires here, so I guess Chan is talking about how good Legionnaires are, and Salad has leaned into them pretty hard. No Demon Prince in this list, but we do have a Dark Apostle with Benediction of Darkness, so we can trans-hitman a unit, so it can only be hit on 4s and cannot be rerolled to hit against. And we're going to be sticking that on this big Chaos Terminator squad with Mark of Tzeentch, which gives it an automatically, or it blanks the first failed saving throw, I believe, of each turn. So you, your opponent basically has to sequence their attacks correctly in order to actually be able to fight into these guys, which gets a little bit tough if you're already talking about a unit that you can only hit on 4s and can't reroll against. They also have the Black Rune of Damnation, so between a 2+ save, Armor of Contempt, and -1 to be wounded, small arms fire basically does nothing to these guys. And then the heavy attacks, you'll blank the first one with Mark of Tzeentch. So they're very, very resilient and very difficult to get through. The other benefit there is that... I guess we have a couple of accursed weapons in this unit. So we have again, that strength 6 combo that we just talked about, but it looks like a lot of them are going to be taking Power Fists. Now the benefit there is that we are bringing Abaddon in this list as well. So Abaddon can point his Chapter Master rerolls at that unit, and you can circumvent the -1 to hit that the Power Fist would normally give you with your full rerolls. Which is and especially since the effects of -1 to hit aren't going to be felt quite as hard, because most of the time you're going to be exploding those attacks on 6s. So even if you don't have any other bonuses active at the time, although you can +1 to hit them to get rid of it. Hitting on 4, rerolling 1s, rerolling everything with exploding 6s gives you a lot more chances to roll 6s. So the mathematical +1 to hit that exploding 6s gives you is actually a little bit more effective if you're. I shouldn't say it's more effective, but it lessens the impact of a low weapon skill score. This one also has a bunch of chaos chosen with cursed weapons and Mark of Slash, so basically the same combo we just talked about. 1 Master of Executions with an intoxicating elixir, so he can give himself plus D3 attacks, and he just does mad damage for 80 points for an individual guy. 5 Warp Talons are pretty good to force your opponent to screen, which is pretty exciting because it gives you stuff for your big bricks to charge. But also, if you just need them to be a secondary objective scorer, that's also fine. And then Abaddon, who's probably going to be one of the game's like superlative late game closers, I have to imagine, because as the rest of the list pushes up, your opponent sinks a ton of attacks into the Chaos Terminators. If that's the only unit you've exposed to them, they probably don't do significant damage. Then you can use the chosen units to peace trade with them, and you get down to a point where Abaddon and potentially the characters are the only units remaining. And at that point, you've basically won the game, because if your opponent hasn't had multiple turns to try to kill Abaddon because he has a 3-wound phase cap and the Mark of Tzeentch, so he ignores the first failed saving throw, he's not going down anytime soon. So a very similar look at the faction, but different in some interesting ways. Now, it's, I think, important to keep in mind that this list doesn't have the Land Raider, and it doesn't have any psychic powers. Is that correct? Yeah. So we're not bringing the Venom Crawler either. So there's very little shooting, although the Chaos Terminator squad has pretty decent shooting. Although it's not iconed, so unfortunately, it as far as I can see, it doesn't get the benefit of +1 AP from Mark of Tzeentch, which is a little bit sad. Do I think Chaos Space Marines could have a hard time with things like Catan? I mean, maybe. They don't like mortal wounds, but I don't know if the amount of mortal wounds that a single Catan does is very difficult. But then moving on, we have our last Chaos Space Marine player here. Dylan is playing Word Bearers. So this is the other sub-faction that's, I think, been seeing a lot of... or beginning a lot of discussion, because they do have a defense against mortal wounds, as Chad was talking about earlier, where they do have a 5+ against damage ignore against mortals. So they have a little bit of resilience to probably what's going to be the most common weapon against them. Although some people were asking whether or not that sort of fixes the problem with mortal wounds, and I don't think it does. One thing that you'll find, and especially I think even Emperor's Chosen players found this when that faction was being played pretty significantly, is that a lot of people teched into mortal wounds to beat them, and some lists, especially things like Tyranid, like Maleceptor combos and stuff, and even Eldari in some situations, and even Thousand Sons could just overload your defensive abilities, because you're relying on pretty expensive 3-wound models to be taking those mortal wounds. Even if they're less efficient than they would normally be, killing a model with those mortal wounds is still going to hurt quite a bit, because it's ignoring all of your other defensive technology. So a 5+ against mortals is good. You take 30%, 33% less damage, but it's not like a silver bullet to mortal wounds. You're still going to die eventually, especially if your opponent's taking a ton of them. So this is a Word Bearers list. We have double Master Possession in this one, which I think is really interesting. One of the interesting things about Word Bearers is that obviously they don't have Fight on Death like Cult of Creations of Bile do, excuse me. But they do have a Resurrection Protocol effect, so they can bring their characters back to life after they die. So bringing multiple characters with Word Bearers is actually probably going to be the way things go. And, not to mention the fact they have hexagrammic wards to keep them alive, so these characters can play a little bit more aggressively than other subfactions and still feel pretty safe. We have a Smash Dark Apostle here, so Exalted Possession to give it combat bonuses, and then Black Mace to give it a 3 damage spillover weapon, so it's going to be killing multiple models, especially against one-wounders. There's no overkill on it. which is pretty cool. I like that. And again, you can play them a little bit aggressively in Word Bearers and keep them alive or resurrect them if they die. The 2 Masters of Possession, and we do have 2 Venom Crawlers to staple to each of their butts so that they can go around and do stuff and get that consistent +1 to cast. And then the rest of the list, we have a ton of objectives secured because the bulk of the list is not objective secured. So 2 Cultist Mobs, 3 Legionary Squads, and 3 units of 10 Possessed. So one of them bringing the Black Rune of Damnation, so again, that -1 to be wounded effect. And everyone else just running up the table. Here we go, boys. One thing that I don't think I mentioned is that in Salad's list, he had... oh, excuse me. No. Yeah, in Salad's... Or no, in Dudes' lists. I'm getting everyone's list confused now. I apologize. Oh, okay. I'm just kidding. So I think a lot of times you... Yeah, okay. All the possessed bricks are end up being the same. I apologize, chat. Going off on a non sequitur there. So yeah, anyway, this list is just going to throw 30 possessive people. And that's it. There you go. Do they have an auto pass for a psychic power after they fail? I don't know if that has transcended editions, chat. I didn't see one when I looked through their subfaction, but they may still have retained that, and I don't remember. But at the very least, you don't want to have to spend CP on that. I guess there's also a little bit of an interesting interaction with the Master of Possession as well, because you have a 5+ against mortals, so the damage that the Master of Possession is doing to your army is actually... it's 30% less, right? So you're a little bit resilient against your own damage, which is kind of nice. It's not like a huge wombo combo, but it's like a little bit of a cute interaction. But that's all the friggin' Chaos Space Marines, chat. Just a bunch of big idiots, a bunch of big 25 mil base idiots are gonna run across the table and fight people, and that's pretty good. And that brings us to the last faction to talk about, which is Adeptus Sororitas. So we have 3 Adepta Sororitas lists that we can talk about. And I think the most interesting here is from Skew Lord, who is aka Lord Solar, who is, I guess, changed his name a little bit because he likes to place skew armies and win off the fact that his opponent can't deal with the number of models that he has. And that's what we're doing today, chat. So we'll rip this Band-Aid off real quick here. This is a Bloody Rose. It's a dual battalion, I believe. Yeah, double battalion, no big deal. So we're paying 3 CP off the bat to bring maximum number of battlefield roll slots. We have a Canoness and Morvenval. Nice Beacon of Faith there on the Canoness. Plus Morvenval with her Warlord trait. So we actually paid the CP for full rerolls on Morven in melee, which is pretty cool. A 20-woman sister squad, 2 5s, and that's in order to unlock 3 sister novitiate squads. So the novitiates get... getting an additional attack from the Bloody Rose benefit gives them 4 attacks apiece. So 4 attacks at Strength 4 AP 1 is pretty solid profile for like just a regular chaff unit. And being able to spam those in large numbers, especially with Armor of Contempt on them, means that you have just a ridiculous amount of objectives secured that you can force into the middle of the table and try to win on primaries. We also have 2 Repentia squads and a Repentia Superior, just as training for a more heavily armored stuff. And then the 2nd Battalion detachment there is bringing 3 5-woman sister squads, I guess, plus 3 more sister novitiate squads. So grand total of 60 novitiates, plus a brick of 20 battle sisters and a bunch of units of 5 just to hold backline objectives. We have the 3rd Sister Repentia squad, so 3 Sister Repentia units there, a Dogmata, and 3 Zephyrim squads to act as a little bit of disruption on your opponent's side. But I think mostly going to be trying to win off the backbone of these Sisters Novitiates, just forcing the maximum number of attacks into your opponent and hoping for the best. And I guess pulling focus from the Repentia. If you can take the center of the table with Sister Novitiates, or even just the regular Battle Sisters, and survive long enough, and your opponent has to commit into them and then trade with Repentia, you're going to be on a winning game there. And the hope is that your opponent can't deal with the absolute ridiculous number of bodies that you're bringing to the table. So, all right, pretty straightforward. He is against Disappointing Salad in game 1. So we'll see if he is able to deal with this enormous brick of Chaos Terminators. We'll see. I actually don't hate his chances. Well, maybe I do, actually. Because it is Cult of Bile, or Creations of Bile, excuse me, the trades are always going to be bad for Sororitas, so I think eventually they will get chewed down, but we'll see. I'm not confident about it for either player. So that's going to be an exciting game to watch, although that's going to happen next week. We do have, I know there were some people asking for a list from Random Player. And, yeah, so I think this is a little interesting, playing an Argent Shroud detachment rather than the Bloody Rose or Valorous Heart we've been seeing more recently. That's bringing a Repentia Superior, Celestine the Gemini Superior, and Morphinval, so the wombo combo of Sororitas characters, although no Warlord trait on Morphinval this time around. 4 units of Battle Sisters, 5 units of Battle Sisters to hold objectives, 3 big units of Persisters Repentia. So not the Bloody Rose Repentia that we all know and love, but at least we do have the big units plus the Repentia Superior, so we are not quite as reliant on the extra attack and rerolls as we normally would be. 3 huge Zephyrum squads, 1 of 10, 1 of 8, and then 1 of 5, and then all of the Retributors. So with that Argent Shroud being able to advance and shoot, the Retributors have a pretty solid threat range, plus the Sisters Repentia. This is really a classic Sisters list, I think. We're just going to be trying to push up the table with all these ladies and just trade 1-for-1 with your opponent until they're out of stuff and your characters can close out the game. And if you can do that for long enough, and you have these 5 Battle Sister squads there giving objectives secured, you're feeling pretty good. So this is really I think the real classic. Yeah, we have the Heavy Flamers in here too, chat. I like the Combi Melta in here in that unit as well, so we have access to, if we really need it, Holy Trinity, because we have a bolt weapon as the bolt profile off of the Repentia, the Superior, the Melta profile off of the Superior, and the Heavy Flamer. So we have all 3 of the Holy Trinity weapons, so we can get +1 to wound on that unit. Means that high volume Heavy Flamer shooting is actually pretty effective. Nice. Good stuff. And then our last list is going to be actually Ash C, who is our Season 3 champion. We do have, I think we have 2 invitational champions playing this time around. Ash and Devin won the last 2 invitational tournaments, and we'll see if they can bring it back this time around. So Ash is playing Valorous Heart. So we actually have 3 separate Sisters detachments in the Invitational this time, which is pretty cool. Not playing, and not just like going full on into the Bloody Rose stuff. We're actually going to be playing a pretty wide variety of the faction. So this is a patrol detachment plus a second patrol. Okay, so we are going to be paying 2 CP for some additional slots. We have Morphinval and a Palatine with Word of the Emperor, so the fight lasts, no invulnerable saves. The Palatine, we did bring the Warlord trait on Morphinval as well. 1 unit of Battle Sisters to fill out the troop slot. And then this is a really interesting part of Ash's, and we actually streamed this. There's a VOD of the stream between Dutz and Ash, where Dutz is playing Sororitas as well in a pod finals. That's over on the replay channel, and that game was absolutely sick. So highly recommend you go watch that game. It is the, let's see if I can find it real quick here, chat. It was the pod 25 finals. Is that right? I hope so. Hope I didn't just pull that out of my butt. It is a pod 25 finals. I did it, chat. Let me go. I nailed it. So that game was super sick, and highly recommend you go check that one out. But this is a very similar build of list. 2 units of Paragon Warsuits, 2 units of Mortifiers in the second patrol detachment, We have Ephriel starting Kyganil, so no Celestine this time around, but we are bringing our third unit of Paragon Warsuits, as well as a Dogmata. So the Dogmata can give objective secured to the Paragons. The Morven Vol gives them rerolls, obviously, because they are core keyworded, so they can get everything. And then they're basically just going to push up the table and try to take as much table space as possible. And very similar, I mean, Ash has a very classic style of Adepta Sororitas, where she's going to either try to trade you or out-attrition you to a point where her characters are the only thing left on the table. So she wants to anchor with the characters really, really heavily. And the Paragon Warsuits are really good at that because they're just hard enough to kill that with their, because of Valor's Heart, no rerolls, Armor of Contempt on a 2+ save, so they're a Terminator profile, and -1 damage on a 4-wound model. So they're like, the unit's like a 2+ save Redemptor Dreadnought to kill, but with access to Miracle Dice and Moment of Grace and all that stuff. So your, very super duper powerful range output. You have multi-meltas and 2 Stormbolters on each model with potentially full rerolls from Morvenval. So as they're coming up the table, they're dealing a bunch of damage to you. It takes a ton of work to try to kill one. You kill one of those units, the next unit's going to trade with you, or Morven's going to trade with you. And eventually you're going to run out of stuff to be able to deal with it. So this list is pretty sweet. You also have the Mortifiers, who are going to be basically doing a similar thing. They also have Heavy Flamers, so you have a lot of infantry clearing between the Stormbolters and the Heavy Flamers, and then just Sisters, multi-meltas shooting at you. And that's what's going on. That's just what's happening. We're just going to see a big brick of Nunbots in the middle of the table, and they're going to have a big fight. Are the games on TTS? Yes. Yep, that is what 2 of the T's and 1 of the S stands for in T5S2, is Tabletop Simulator. But for those who are just showing up in chat, TTS40k.com is the series website, and TTS40k.com/invitational has all of this information that we've been talking about. There's a stream schedule up there, and you can find as the streams get scheduled, they'll go up on links down here. You can also find those on this channel, and they're going to be streamed both to the YouTube channel, so just Tactical Tortoise, and the Tactical Tortoise TV Twitch channel. So we're going to be live. That's starting tomorrow at 11 a.m. It's going to be the first game. That's Necrons versus Asuryani, MaxGw versus MooMooCow. And then we have 2 games tomorrow evening, and then 1 game each Thursday, Friday, Sunday, and Monday. And those are going to be rolling into the round 2 games as well. So we'll have round 2 games scheduled as the round 1 games complete as we move down the bracket. So we're going to have probably 2 solid weeks of streaming of all of these games, and then we have the semifinals and grand finals on Saturday the 30th and Sunday the 31st. So it's freaking awesome, chat. There's the players playing for accolades and a couple $100 of prize support that we've been accumulated from circuit events, and I think it's going to be freaking sick. All these lists are really cool, and I think pretty representative of the metagame. It's interesting that there is kind of this hyper representation of Sororitas and Heretic Astartes, but I definitely think that a lot of that's because of we have a little bit of a Sororitas bias in the server for whatever reason, and the Heretic Astartes is new, so people are going to be playing that. Is TTS a good way to get better at 40k? Absolutely. For sure. Where do the Season 6 pods fit into the schedule? The Season 6 pods are already getting paired, chat. The first one going live this week. Yeah, I highly recommend TTS as a way to get better at 40k. It does what it says on the tin. And if you want to get started in TTS, on the home page here, we have a whole explanation on how to get started. So you can find out how to access the mods and download everything and potentially join the circuit. And yeah, that's you should come hang out and play. But because it is literally a simulator of a tabletop, it's not like some games where because it's kind of an abstract representation of the game. So I know there's a lot of simulators like Vassal, for example, where it turns whatever game you're playing into an isometric experience, and that's kind of fundamentally different, especially for a miniatures game where 3-dimensionality is a real big deal. Tabletop Simulator literally creates a tabletop in your computer, so the experience is almost identical to playing on a physical tabletop. There are very few differences between a physical tabletop and Tabletop Simulator. So I think it's probably, I would say, the best way to get better at 40k. And I think, I'm certainly biased, but I think the competitive experience is also better on Tabletop Simulator because it's much more precise. It's way, way harder to cheat people on TTS than it is in regular 40k. So I think that's a big benefit as well. So yeah, anyone who's interested, come join the Discord server. We play constantly over there. !Discord and chat. There's also a link in the description, and you can join T5S2 events there as well. We play pods constantly, which are 4-round tournaments, and there are external events that other servers run that are also ranked on the live standings, and you can get points and stuff. We also, I think we should have a Youngbloods event coming up pretty soon as well for new players who are new to TTS and to 40k. So if you're interested, come play, dude. It'll be a good time. Anyway, yeah, I think that's all the lists. We did it. We talked about all the lists. So I think I'll wrap things up there. But yeah, I do want to thank everyone for coming and hanging out with me as we talked about some invitational lists. I'm really excited for the season. I think the season invitational is going to be awesome. And yeah, get hype. How long do games take? It's the same as a regular game of 40k. In fact, probably faster. There's no setup or takedown, so you just spawn in your models and then play with the game. So usually about 2 hours if you know what you're doing. Obviously, a game of 40k is going to take exponentially longer the more you have to look up your rolls. But once you get good at it, the game was probably over in about 2 hours. I would say that's average for a competitive game, and you can get it down to 90 minutes. I know Speedhammer games, which is on a 1 hour per player chess clock, usually takes about 90 minutes. How am I going to jump between 2 games tomorrow? The way I always do it. I can just look at both of them. All right, chat. I am going to go ahead and pop things off. But thanks everyone for coming and hanging out this Tactical Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown of the list. Remember, you can check them out again on the website, tts40k.com/invitational. And tune in tomorrow morning for the first game of the tournament. It's going to be sweet. And with that, I'll leave you to it. So cheers, everybody. Have a good one.